is 5:12, and so I will call to order this meeting of the Arlington ISD Board of Trustees on April 17th, 2025. And the first item on tonight's meeting is the legislative update from David Anderson. I'll turn it over to Dr. Smith.
Yes, as you all know, Mr. Anderson and I converse often, and you all have known him for a while, but we wanted to make sure that we had a midpoint in the legislative session, a little later than midpoint, an update for you all from David, and especially we know that some of you might be heading down to Austin next week, so we thought this would be a good time to give you an update on some key bills moving forward. So David and I have been in communication. I think we have a few bills to update you on, and obviously there was some action yesterday, so just a little bit.
Oh, we can share. We can share.
Yeah,
Those are going to be for reference.
Jennifer and I can share.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We're so glad you're here, William.
Thank you.
Oh, Melody's got extras.
Ready?
Yep.
Well, good evening and thank you. Wonderful dinner and wonderful company. I pulled together a slide deck to use tonight to help keep me on track, but also because things have been moving targets, as Darla knows, from all of the various templates that you've seen in the last few days, and the model runs on this. So as we start, I know this is casual. I do want to reassert that stop me at any time if there's something that we talk about or that comes up here we want to dig into. I hope you'll stop me so we can do that. I wanted to start with framing up this session because I've worked with Hilco Partners and now Strive since 2003, CEA 97 to 2003, some engagement with the legislature on behalf of textbook publishers prior to that. I've never seen a session like this one, and I think the numbers will show you why. As of 5:05 today, and I think we're just a few minutes beyond that, we have 45 days, 6 hours, and 55 minutes left. Not that anyone in my office is counting. 140 days, 95 gone, you know we're getting near the end. Almost 9,000 bills and resolutions have been filed. This is a record. We've never had this many. And the other thing about this is we are tracking more education bills than we've ever tracked before. Normally we track between 840 and 920 bills that touch public ed in one way, shape, or form. This time we're tracking 1,219. And we track those, well, let me say this first. In the past, you know from visits down there and from other engagement, you usually focus on the Education Committee in the House and the Senate. We watch the appropriations and finance for the budget. And we'll have something in state affairs. We might have something that is in ways and means because it's tax related. But very limited. The great majority of bills went to education. And that's important because you know from your relationships, you focus on the 13, or now this year, the 15 people on the Public Ed Committee, and you have a real good idea of what's going on in almost every area. This time, that's not true. Working with 17 different committees, instead of 5 or 6 committees, it's created a really challenging circumstance for everyone, whether it's TASA, or TASB, or us, or any of the other groups, because it feels like, Michael Hill, if I can use a football analogy, it feels like they're flooding the zone against us. They're putting so many things out there that it makes it very difficult to keep up with everything that's going on. Additionally, with our tracking, we're doing 19 topical tracks, the same ones that we did last session. We're probably going to, after this session, modify those because we're seeing that there are some things that are not quite where they fit. But all in all, we have got a lot of attention to public ed this session. And as you know, not all of it is positive. So I did want to take just a second, we're going to do this very quickly, to go back because this gives you the frame of reference for where we are with bills. And we're not ready to give you checks and no checks yet. We'll do that at the end of the session when we come back as we've done before and say specifically, here's your priority, here are the bills that address it, here's what happened with it. But school funding, school safety, academic growth, very, very well framed this year by the trustees and the administration. With school funding, you asked your legislature to provide sustainable, accountable, and predictable funding for students in classrooms. And these were the, just pull all of them up. These were the points that you specifically talked about. I do want to say that base school funding on student enrollment rather than attendance. You'll recall we've said this is a multi-session play. I feel as though we have made progress a little last session, more this session. I think that in the 2027 session, that's when full court press by the education groups to get us to attendance based on enrollment rather than, or funding rather than on enrollment rather than attendance is the right way to go, particularly because we're going to have 1 year, we'll be in the first year of voucher-funded schools, and you recognize with the voucher bill, the funding there is based on attendance, or on enrollment, not on attendance. It doesn't matter if the students show up or not. The full amount of the voucher is going to go to that school. With safety, you ask the legislature to partner with school districts for comprehensive supports to make sure students are protected in classrooms. There's such irony that 2 days ago, when they were debating House Bill 6, the school safety bill, we had the shooting across the county line at Wilmer Hutchins High School. Your former state board member, Representative AISD-TV, who still has a great spot for Arlington ISD, had planned to speak against one of the bills we're going to talk about in a little while, but it was on the floor. She wasn't able to because she was on the phone with Stephanie in Dallas and with other people about what resources might be needed. But build on the previous proposals, stabilize the funding streams, very significant. Prioritize and increase health identification services, and then the multidisciplinary threat assessment teams for every school district. And again, we've got some information about the bills there. Academic growth, we have, I do want, back up here, David. Fair, transparent accountability system for all schools that receive public funds, proven academic supports, viable accountability system. You haven't heard much about this. You will next week.
Yes.
House Bill 4 next week will get a lot of attention. That has been a work in progress. My colleague and someone who's consulted with UD Carney has been involved in every step of the way with Chairman Buckley on that bill. And what she said to me about where they're going with it, there will be sections in that bill that check a number of the things that we've talked about that you have in your agenda. And I'll be real pleased when they release it. Until they release the bill, we go on what they say they're going to have in it and what we've helped them with, but until we see it, it's still a little bit of smoke and mirrors. School finance. House Bill 2 by Chairman Buckley passed yesterday. There were floor amendments that made some changes to the bill, which is why the models that you have seen, Darla, still are work in progress for us. But when we looked at this in the office yesterday and this morning, the things that we wanted to mention to you, and we did talk with Amanda Bronson at Tazewell, we worked very closely with her, but the changes to the existing M&O hold harmless provisions were eliminated. The hold harmless on the INS that affects a lot of fast growth schools, that hold harmless, the negative effect of that is still there. Chairman Buckley was not real interested in doing anything with that. We think we're going to have more support on that in the Senate side. That really doesn't have much of an effect on Arlington, I assume, because of the characteristics of the district, without digging into that. But for some of the districts south of you, that is pretty significant.
Yeah, I know a lot of my colleagues across the state were really upset about that. And I don't know if they're completely happy with what they heard reverting back. So
quick conversations with a number of people who were in the Capitol yesterday, a few this morning, some by phone, indicated that with the changes, we like the changes. We're pleased that they have played out the way they did because they generally mean more money for most districts, but it still doesn't get you to where you need to be to make up for 6 years of lack of financial support from the state. The appropriation for declining ADA, they did jump that up from 60 million to 300 million. The additional 240 million is helpful, but when you again look at the state and look at how the enrollment is declining, that is not going to be a whole lot for any one district. The compensatory ed, pardon me, I'm just having trouble with my controller. I don't know if I'm not close enough, but so I've got two up right now. The modification to compensatory ed and bilingual ed allotments. In the second year of the biennium, by not doing it in the first year, they're able to maintain alignment with the requirements for the budget within the controller's budget estimate. And they put that into the first year, they would have been out of whack and would not have been able to get the budget through. He would not have certified it. This next one, this is like the start of the legislative session. Legislature starts on the first Tuesday after the second Monday in January, the first month of the year. This is 75% of the 40% of the game must be spent. So again, I'm going to look over at the folks on the table to my right to say, offer any further breakdown on this, but this does give more flexibility to school districts than we had in the prior bill. No district is required to give an employee a pay increase of more than $15,000. The school safety increases in the budget, insurance allotment increases are not going to be used in the gain calculation for the 75%.
That was a good amendment. Yeah. Not that we would have hit that 15,000 on our increase.
I put this in because I know the interest in charter schools, particularly when we were working with the state board last year, Melody, with the state board on the charter to try to keep the one from being authorized in Arlington. So they did put a cap on the charter school facilities for both years at 100 and 160 million. I'm going to stand up and see if I can't get a little bit closer. If y'all will bear with me.
Sure.
Senator Huffman, who chairs the Finance Committee in the Senate, does have Senate Bill 260, which is the safety allotment, and that passed third reading yesterday. Bonin has an identical bill in the House, and it has already passed, and it was laid on the table. It passed committee, and it has been laid on the table in the House pending the call of 360. That was done on the 16th. So at some point next week, they'll bring up 360, 260 rather, and that will be the bill that prevails. The Senate bill will move forward. From what we understand, the Senate bill provisions are probably going to be received very favorably in the House. It increases to $28, the safety allotment per student. $1, it's a little bit more complicated than Bonin's bill because there's an additional $1 for each student in ADA for every $50 by which your minimum VA exceeds 6160. So that's going to be your math calculation?
He's on it, he's ready.
And the per campus amount is going to double from 15 to 30. So again, Justin, is this enough to cover all of your school safety costs? No, it's not. It's a big jump, but it's not enough. But again, we're looking for ways to reach a critical mass with increases in a lot of different areas.
So,
questions?
I do.
Yes.
We're asking for speculation. I'm asking for speculation on something that we weren't there or present for. But on this last one, SB 260, are you able to speculate that, was this truly them trying to help, or was this an effort to say, we at least did something? Is this a true gesture, or?
I think it's both, and I think it depends on who you talk to.
Okay.
That there are some people that we're throwing you something, there are others that are generally trying to help. And remember, all of the circumstances that we're dealing with money this time is affected by the elephant in the rotunda that we talked about before, the voucher bill. That, yes, we are going to take $1 billion out of the state treasury and spend it for a voucher program in year 2 of the biennium, which means $2 billion in the next biennium. It's going to double. Don't look at that, is what they're saying. Don't look there.
Mm-hmm.
Look over here at what we're doing with House Bill 2 and with Senate Bill 260. And some other places as well.
So, give me the timing on HB 124. That's not been heard in the House. It's going to be substituted.
It's been heard in the committee. It has been sent through calendars. It's been placed on the House calendar. It has not been heard. And so what Chairman Bonin did was basically move to put that on the table pending the arrival of the Senate bill, which basically says the Senate bill will be the bill that prevails.
So here's my question.
Yes.
So I like the 30, obviously I like the 37 for
Yes.
campus amount versus the 30, and I like the 28 versus the 14. So anything can happen with amendments, but rather than just substitute the Senate bill for the House bill, is there a possibility we'll get the best of both worlds?
What they do in the House, there are 2 ways that this could play out. When they get it on the House floor, the bill will be amended into final House form for approval. They'll send it back to the Senate, and the Senate will concur or not. So we have 2 ways to see this improve or get worse. They could take the lower of both. But what we believe will happen is the Senate numbers will likely prevail on the House floor. The House may put something in, but when they go to conference, they'll work all this out. And the bottom line on this is that you will see an increase from $10 to a considerably higher amount per pupil, plus the increase in the amount per campus. So this, we could be looking at increasing the amount of money received in school safety allotments by perhaps as much as 80 to 100%. It could double. Yeah. Speaking of safety, Jeff Leach's discipline bill. You know, there's no Senate counterpart for that bill. This is the bill that will move. I had about 3 pages of notes that I thought, am I going to put this in the PowerPoint? I decided so. It's too dense already in some places.
Yeah.
But the discipline bill, in terms of what it deals with, suspension and expulsion, notable changes. And Michael, again, I don't know if anyone here has looked at all of this yet. You don't need to spend a lot of time digging into it other than how you might want us to try to affect this in the Senate. And this is something that for those of you who are going to be down next week, this is probably one of the bills that when you come in, we're going to have a briefing for you to say this is one of probably 4 or 5 that we're going to have in our pocket as talking points when we meet with your delegation and with others. Suspension and expulsion changes. The one that I think is going to require much more analysis is the part of it is the virtual disciplinary alternative education program. Because some of our DAPs around the state have worked very well, some have not. Some of our virtual programs have worked very well, some have not. What I hope that we would get to is characteristics of the virtual disciplinary alternative ed program it reflects the best of what we know about the AEPs plus the best of what we know about virtual education. And that's a tall task. Very frankly, I'm concerned that we won't get there. This bill will create something that provides an alternative, but one that may need a lot more attention in future sessions. Much more flexibility for removal from class, and there is some information in here, some direction about special ed discipline, because that is something that the members have heard a lot about. You know better than just about anyone how the percentages of special ed kids have gone up in our public schools all across the state, and the special needs that they may have with regard to how misbehavior or inappropriate behavior is handled. The bill that we talked about, I think, Matt, we've talked about trustees, you've talked about what's been down there. Carolyn Fairley's cell phone bill. This is a hardline bill, and it does remove a lot of the flexibility that you currently have with this, because it requires you to adopt and implement and ensure that the district or the campus complies with what you're doing with a written policy prohibiting students from using a personal communication device while on school property during the school day. They do define the devices. Sort of tip of the hat to people, old guys like me, they did remove references to pagers. So the pagers, for those of you who may be carrying pagers, or have people on your campuses carrying pagers, they've all been omitted from this. The other point that two other points I want to make for you, you are required in your mandatory policy, if this passes, to establish disciplinary measures for violation, and it authorizes policy for confiscation of the device and provides some direction for how long you can keep the device and how long and what you can do in terms of disposing of it if it's not claimed consistent with your policies. It expressly excludes the applicability of this mandatory policy on an electronic device that you provide to the student. And what we heard a lot about is, particularly with some of our middle school and high school classes, kids are using apps on their phone with some of the instruction that occurs in the classroom. So there's a lot that has to be worked out on this bill. There is not a true Senate companion for this, so it still has a way to go. But in light of the success I've heard you talk about, particularly on some of your secondary campuses with this is one that we will continue to track and keep you appraised of.
And just the ability for districts to preserve local control.
That's it.
Because nothing right now is stopping districts from implementing a no cell phone policy. Some districts have, but this bill would take away that local decision. So that's why we've got to follow it.
If you've read Jonathan Haidt's book, Anxious Generation, and you see the recommendations that he presents in the back of the book, you can see that she was very influenced by that, but she didn't really pick up on his suggestion that these don't necessarily need to be mandated by the state or by the federal government. Academic growth. There are so many bills to talk about. We could be here till 10 o'clock, but I wanted to highlight a few of them. I mentioned this in our prologue. Buckley's testing and accountability bill, they're looking at some radical changes with state assessment, including the possibility of using nationally normed tests such as NWA Math or Curriculum Associates iReady or Renaissance Star. There are things they want those tests to do, and as we've looked at them with great help from Dee and Allison Matney, most of the recognized nationally normed tests do them. Some do them to greater degrees than others. Matt, Jennifer, are you using any of those tests in addition, or using MAPS? MAPS is the test that is used by about 64 to 68% of the districts in the state. And the deputy commissioner who came from Dallas ISD, they also use MAPS. this is secondhand, so I may not have this quite right, but at TEA, when they were talking about some of these issues for this committee and what the commissioner hoped they would be able to accomplish, the deputy commissioner said, the MAPS program does all of these things you want, delivers that data in a very presentable way. I don't know if they're leaning toward a national contract, a statewide contract for that yet or not. I think that they're looking for ways to be very flexible with the assessment and moving away from TEA developed tests as we have had for 33 years, all the way back to 1992. Craig has got Senate Bill 1191. There is a House companion for this. This is the bill that we've been told will be the bill that moves. This one, getting ahead here. Creighton's bill takes what's in statute right now, which says the commissioner may establish a uniform GPA calculation. And if he does, you have to use it. Right now, every school district gets to decide what it does with the uniform GPA. Commissioner Morath has asked for the authority. He's asked the chairman to take this and change the statute from a may to a must, or may to shall. In which case, he will do this, and he will have to do that. In 2007, the legislature gave that authority to the Commissioner of Higher Education. That very specifically, the Texas School Alliance leadership, John Folks in Northside ISD, David Anthony in Cyfair, Richard Middleton was in Northeast, Chris Colwell in Garland, basically took it on themselves to make sure that he didn't do that. And about 4 months into his implementation, he raised the white flag and said, no, it is a bad policy. It's not good policy to have this done at the state level. The differences in the state and what you want to do are so significant in the school districts. And that's been long enough that nobody remembers. And so we're doing this again. This time, we're giving it to TEA and the Western Commission. I do think that we can derail that bill because that, I would argue, that is an authority that is very important to have in Arlington ISD. It lets you decide how you want to value courses. You may decide that concurrent enrollment, dual credit concurrent enrollment, AP, IB, you may weight them all the same, or you may weight them differently because of the investment you make in those courses. So that's another one we're tracking.
Quick question.
It's jumping on me, I'm sorry. Yes, question.
Question on House Bill 4. So I did notice last night when the amendments kept getting knocked down.
Yes.
Buckley did, I mean, I can't call him promises, but he did repeat himself quite a bit.
He did.
Saying that House Bill 4, and he didn't name House Bill 4, but that's what he was referring to. He said abolish STAR,
yes.
And that's not what House Bill 4 currently outlines, right? It basically outlines we're going to test more frequently, and there's an assumption in there that that will take away the high stakes of it all, but it won't. It will just make us have more assessment starting at the 3rd grade level. So last night, I thought it was interesting that someone specifically, I think it was a Hinojosa, asked him about nationally normed reference tests being a measuring stick for all campuses now. And he said, yes, that's what we're working toward. So if we do NWDA MAP, if a lot of districts in our area do NWDA MAP, could we, would it be a good strategy next week to really narrow our focus with whomever we meet with and propose that? Because I think that if we give them something tangible and give them the information about what we currently do, and MAP actually shows us growth, it measures a lot more of what matters as opposed to STAR, and it's more cognitively appropriate of an assessment. Would that be something worth kind of focusing on in our individual meetings?
Sarah, I would recommend to you and the others who are there and Jennifer that if we have the revised language from the bill, there will be one way we approach it. If that revised language has not been, it's not been released yet, then we take a little bit different approach with how we promote this.
Okay.
And I do believe the critical point that Buckley is trying to accomplish is, if you look back on the 35-year history of large-scale state assessment in Texas, Matt, how many times have we changed the test? We've gone from tabs to teams to TACs.
How long have we
I think
changed?
we've had 5 or 6. But the name has changed, but the test has remained fundamentally the same. It's a very simple assessment. Is it a better test? Yes, but it's not a more sophisticated way of measuring student performance. And I think where Buckley wants to go is, let's have a better assessment that can tell us more about where our students are and provide even better data.
In real time,
Yes.
that teachers can actually use.
That's right. Rather than waiting 6 weeks to get all that.
Well, it's based on growth. It compares the student to the student. It's based on growth, and it's something that districts are opting to do anyway. So it would reduce the amount of assessments, and so that's why I'm really hoping, depending on what happens with the language, by the time the 24th gets here, I really hope that there is an opportunity for us to plug that as much as we can, because I think that can get support. And Buckley was actually repeating that a couple times last night.
Yeah, especially late near the end where he tried to compare STAR to shingles.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it sounds like he's all for replacing STAR
Yeah.
with a norm reference test like math.
This bill, Chairman Buckley is carrying major legislation in several areas this session, as you have seen, with school finance, with the voucher program, with testing and accountability. From a teaching and learning perspective, all due respect to our money people back here on the other bill, from a teaching and learning perspective, if he accomplishes what it appears they endeavor to accomplish, this will be a lasting legacy for him.
Mm-hmm.
School finance bills, we have one every 4 to 6 years. Some are good, some are not. But this is a tremendous shift. Conceptually, this is a tremendous shift. It really gets us back to a point where the original testing was lined up. Because I think some of you will recall, when state testing started, at TEA there was a real clear message about the role of testing. The assessment division at TEA was under the Associate Commissioner for Curriculum and Standards. And the message was, state assessment is part of the teaching and learning process. It took 8 years, but we did finally in 2002 get our assessment and our standards aligned so that the test was constructed within the standards. That's really been distorted over the last 20 years when they moved the assessment division out of the curriculum and standards unit and put it in the accountability division. The message then was, Sarah, this is, assessment is part of the accountability system, not part of teaching and learning. This, I believe, gets us back to assessment as part of teaching and learning that informs our accountability system rather than part of it that drives it.
No,
So-
huge shift. So you think
It
this will be for Buckley what HB2 in 2019 was for Hubert?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting.
And when all is said and done, people will remember Brad being involved with vouchers, but Brandon Creighton is the person who is really carrying the voucher bill. That is Senate Bill 2 by Brandon Creighton. The school finance bill is Brad Buckley's, it's a House bill, but this is the bill. It still has to get to the Senate, and there is no Senate companion bill for it. And it will be a tough slog when we get there. But that's where I think conversations next week, is you've got 15% of the senators represent part of Arlington. This is where conversations with senators or staff in all 4 of those offices, all 5 of those offices, actually, I forget about the little sliver we have. No, I guess it's 4.
It's 4.
Yeah, it's 4. So, Terry Leo Wilson, former member of the State Board of Education, has House Bill 100. This affects instructional materials. This is the bill that Representative Aisha Davis was going to speak against before the shooting occurred. This bill initially does something that makes sense to everybody. I think, Jennifer, you would agree. It says that our state-approved materials, the money that we spend our state instructional materials allotment on, should be 100% aligned with the T's. There's a little twist to it, though, because there are some programs that are designed as intervention programs or supplemental programs that aren't intended to meet all of them. So we need to make sure that that's protected. But the other part of it is, she's gone a step farther to say that in this new state instructional materials review and approval process, any program that is put on the rejected list, you cannot use any funds to buy. You can't use state funds, you can't use local funds, you cannot use funds that are provided for you by a local foundation. You can't use them. The dilemma there is that well, what company would put their program through the state NEMRA process if it has any issues? This is where we get into some of the culture wars around instructional materials. Programs that were addressed in the podcast Sold the Story, for example. The companies that publish those don't necessarily put them through the instructional materials review process, but now the state board, by simple majority vote, can put any program through. If Justin and I came up with a real nifty phonics program that we're going out and selling around the state, but we didn't intend to go through the state review, all it would take is 8 state board members to say, we're going to review your program. And if they review it and place it on the rejected list, we're out of business in Texas. It's flexibility for school districts that is really at risk with some of the provisions of Bill 100. In governance, this is a bill that we've talked a little bit about casually, but because it hasn't moved significantly through the process, you haven't seen much about it, but it is one that warrants a lot of attention. I'm going to look over at Dennis because I think this is where his thoughts on the implications of this bill become invaluable to you. This is Creighton's bill. It requires all school board seats to be filled in an election after notice from the commissioner for any district that received an overall performance rating of F for the previous 2 years were designated as rapidly declining, which is defined in this bill. Basically, it's a takeover bill. School board, before taking final action on the employment of the superintendent, has to review the academic performance history of each school or system where he served in a leadership role, where he or she served in a leadership role. This is something you may be doing right now. This puts this codifies it. Requires additional information about trustees to be posted on the district website, submitted to TEA. TEA must approve authorized school board training providers. This is another way to basically get at TASB and some of the other providers. Requires the commissioner to assign relative performance percentile rankings for school districts and charter schools. As someone who consults with you as trustees and with the district leadership, I believe this is a bill that is a serious threat to independent governance of independent school districts. The eye is at risk with this bill. Dennis, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I see your head nodding.
Although the commissioner seems to take over districts anyway and tells boards they're done, but still, this would be chaotic.
Yeah. What's the stage of this one right now?
This bill is being heard and passed by the Senate Education Committee, I believe.
Will it have any legs in the House?
Commissioner Morath is not as well regarded in the House as in the Senate, but I think this is one that I would suggest we have on our discussion list for Thursday morning before we walk over to Capitol to talk about. Also, under the governance category, Senator Creighton has a bill regarding the contract to operate with the school district campus. It just, again, more direction about how you interact and operate. really having trouble with my button. I haven't used one in a while, I guess I have a heavy thumb. Mays Middleton's bill, limitation on rules, bylaws, and policies adopted by district's board of trustees. This is another one that I think requires some attention, but in our conversations with Senate members and staff over the last few days, this is one that was raised. The level of awareness, our heightened awareness in our conversations on the Senate side. And then I have a few miscellaneous bills for you to take a look at and be aware of. Remember, we're tracking 1,300 plus, and so we're just getting to a few. Senator Paxton has a bill about non-enrolled students, basically homeschool students in UIL. You remember two sessions ago, we had the James Frank bill that Senator Paxton carried in the Senate. It said that homeschool students could participate in UIL activities if the district opts in. This now makes it an opt-out. That they have to participate. They have every right to participate in Arlington ISD unless you as a body take an official vote in a public meeting to say, no, you can't. And if you do that, any student, any family in the Arlington ISD boundaries that is homeschooling can take the student and they can go to any neighboring school district that allows it and participate in the school district. I know the UIL folks have some concerns about this because it creates two classes of students. The student in an ISD or a charter school moves, they're ineligible for varsity participation for a year. This, though, creates a different class for homeschool students. They can move from one district to another and participate in varsity sports. So this is, oh, here
I wonder about no passive play for our homeschool students.
Yeah.
That's the same as what you have right now with the opt-in. The parent commits to you that the student is passing and meets all of the eligibility requirements. Bettencourt, special ed bill. This, Senator Bettencourt, we often think about with tax bills and election bills and others. You know, Senator Bettencourt was a county official in Houston before he was elected to the Senate. But he has a special education bill that is really changing some of the formulas, and I think we're familiar with it. We don't need to spend a lot with it. I did plug in a couple of the points that it moves from, we have transitions from a placement-based system to a service intensity-based system. Commissioners will be required to develop levels of support. Funding will be tiered to reflect that. This is, again, rolling, you heard me say earlier, this is going to be rolled in the second year of the biennium. That gives the commissioner a year to go through the rulemaking process, plus it helps keep the budget aligned with the controller's verification.
What's the temperature around the state? I mean, I think in general it's a good idea, right? Given the wide spectrum of services and level intensity of service we provide to all the students that receive special needs services, is this generally favored, or is there some concerns with it?
Well, I'll look over, if I may, I'll look at Matt and Jennifer, their conversations with some of their colleagues, but in general, the reaction we've had has been favorable to this. But with that favorable reaction has been one codicil, and that is, this really makes sense, but you have to have the appropriate amount of funding to go with it. And then, look over at our, so keep an eye on the money over here. If they keep the funding levels the same and they move to the tiered system, you're probably worse off than you were before because of the level of service that would be expected on some of those tiers. But if there is more money coming with this, and we have an opportunity to see the support for this grow, then this, I think this makes more sense. But again,
That's exactly the way it's been described. And I do know the commissioner has been dabbling in some models of this over the course of the year and allowed some districts to opt into a pilot to see how it would play out in their district. Not financially, but the coding piece and the intensity based model. So I think that we are going to see some, this has been one they've been talking about since the last session, or was it 2 sessions ago? So it's been a little while. Yeah.
Remember, we had the advisory committee that met. They talked about it 2 sessions ago. After last session, we had the advisory committee established. If you look at the recommendations from the advisory committee on special ed funding, you see a lot of their recommendations are in this picture.
Well, and the commissioner hit it hard in his interim reports to the House and the Senate. And so we did, and it seems like a better model, but the $1 million question literally is, there's, like with all these funding bills, there's winners and losers.
Yes.
And are we going to be one of the winners or one of the losers? So, devil's in the detail.
Let me add one thing, though, to this. This is a model of how to look at policy. For almost every biennium over the last 10 to 12 years, there has been some sort of interim charge that requires a select committee or a special commission or gives some authority to the commissioner to pull together a group to look. When they take topics like this and they do spend time during the interim in a thoughtful way, that effort is funded. There's money there to bring experts in and talk and provide support for staff. You get recommendations that make sense as the basis for policy. The legislature is a citizen legislature where they're coming in for 140 days every 2 years. The benefit of that to them is tremendous. So I'm of a mind to say that even if this isn't perfect, if this reflects a great majority of those recommendations, this is something that should be supported because it is the model for how to thoughtfully look at developing policy. And I think we got some good recommendations from that commission. We do some work with T-Case. I know the comments from T-Case about the work of that commission. They felt it was very well informed. So that's really where this is. This is the next logical step. So the final 6 weeks. I gave you this is the printout that if you walk next week when we're in those offices, you're going to see this on stapled to the bulletin board. You're going to see it under the glass on the desks. People are going to have it in the calendars. We're moving to the point where deadlines become important. This session, with all of the bills that have been filed, and with the slow pace of the session, particularly on the House side, and remember, this is the first time in 50 years that the House actually gavelled in, not knowing who the speaker would be. You're going to have a slower start. Okay, a little bit higher turnover in the House. You had a lot of turnover in committee chairs and vice chairs, as we've talked about before. It is slower. What that means is, when you look at the number of bills, the number of new members, the slower pace in the House, and you apply it to this, you're going to have a tremendous bottleneck development. I think it's safe to say that if a House bill has not been heard and passed by the House committee in the next 2 weeks, that House bill as a standalone bill is likely in. That's just where it is. Now, it can be amended into another bill. Senate bills that come to the House have an additional 10 days to live. So the Senate bills become more important for us really with each passing day. But all of this says the chair of the Calendars Committee, Todd Hunter, who is very close with probably the most trusted ally, elected official ally of the Speaker. That the Speaker and Chairman Hunter are going to have a lot to say about what bills make it through. Because they're going to be, it's their direction that's going to determine which bills get set on the calendar. There was an interesting turn of events today. Did you read about what happened in the House with the local consent calendar?
No.
Did the gavel break it in?
Oh no, God, that last night was hilarious.
They're not up to their old tactics, are they?
Sort of. The House Democrats had a proposal today. It was a resolution to recognize the late Cecile Richards, who was president of the National Planned Parenthood, and was very involved in Texas politics. Her mother was late Governor Ann Richards. And a number of the Republicans objected to this. But because of the way they do their memorial resolutions, The only way that group of people had to stop it was basically to threaten the Democrats if you don't go down there and kill all of their bills off the consent. So that's what happened today. The local consent calendar was just completely wiped out. Normally, that sort of activity doesn't occur until the second week of May.
Yeah.
Here it's occurring at the end of the second week. So we're going to see a lot more of that going on. Local consent calendars, it's easy to knock those off. It's much harder to knock a bill off of, to take a bill down off the regular calendar. But there's going to be a bottleneck there. I do think when we get together and talk in June about what happened, telling you now we have more bills and resolutions filed than any other session. At that point, I'm going to say to you, we had fewer bills passed in this session than we've had passed in probably the last 3 or 4 sessions. It's going to take us back to the 2017 or 2015 level of bills passing. I think in general, as Texans, we're all a little better off with fewer bills that pass.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
that's another one I have. So your timing, the timing of the visit next week is positive. It's really probably the last week. It makes sense to come down and talk about a wide variety of bills. Beyond that, any visit to the Capitol should be very specific. I used the example of the bill last session that Chris Turner carried with help from the Senate to allow you to lease the Fine Arts facility. Mellie's visit to the Capitol and her testimony to that bill was very targeted. The timing was just right. Again, next week is probably the last week for us to do the sort of broad approach. And it's not going to be as broad as we've done before. It's really going to be 5 or 6 bills. We won't talk about all 5 or 6 in every office, but with help from Kate, we'll try to narrow that down and say, in this office, here are the 2 or 3 bills we want to talk about. In that office, here are the 2 or 3 bills. So that's where we are with this final session. You also, the other thing I was going to mention is you're also going to begin to see people lining up for other offices, because as soon as the session ends, the next election cycle begins. And we have 2 statewide offices that are vacant. We haven't had 2 statewide offices vacant in over a decade. The Controller's office with Lynn Hager has resigned to become Chancellor at Texas A&M. Whoops.
No, not here.
Not anymore.
Not here.
And the Attorney General's office, where Attorney General has announced that he's going to run for the U.S. Senate seat. We think right now, I think 3 people have announced for that. There probably will be 5 or 6 or 7 by the time the dust settles. There are a number of senators that I think they get up every morning and look in the mirror and think, "Damn, you make a good lieutenant governor." But because that position is not vacant, they're going to look at how they can be upwardly mobile with Larry Revere, the Attorney General and the Controller's office. It's an interesting circumstance right now with the Controller, because he is leaving, and the governor will appoint someone on a temporary basis to fill that role. He can put a placeholder in, someone from his staff, which he has done in a number of other agencies, knowing that person is not going to be the permanent replacement. Or he could give a leg up to someone who's announced to run, for example, Christy Crabb, who is a railroad commissioner and has announced she's running for controller. If he appoints her to that, she now runs as the incumbent. And it also gives the governor an opportunity to fill the railroad commission seat, which there could be a number of sitting senators or representatives who are interested in that seat. So the political shuffling it's happening behind the scenes right now. You'll see it really begin in earnest a couple of days after the General signed the die, June 2nd. I think it's June 2nd. First Tuesday.
Yes.
So,
David, the Attorney General does not have to vacate his position, is that correct, in order to run for a Senate seat?
he does.
He does.
He does. Anyone who is up for election in this next cycle, which is half of the senators and all of the statewide offices, if they're moving up, they can't run for both offices. So Ken Paxton, he doesn't give up his seat. He serves until January of 2027, but he will be leaving that regardless of what happens in his campaign.
Got it, thank
If
you.
he's defeated, he's out of office completely. If he wins, he's going to DC. The same thing happens with some of the senators. For example, Mace Middleton has announced he's a candidate for Attorney General. His Senate term is one that ends in January 27th. He can't run for both those seats, so he's basically giving up his Senate seat to run for Attorney General. Someone else, any one of the other half of the senators whose four-year term ran this last time, Joan Huffman, for example. Joan was reelected last November. She could run for Attorney General or for Comptroller and not give up the Senate seat. She basically runs without risk.
Got it.
So,
Thank you.
any other questions? We'll hear more from us as we plan for next Thursday. So,
Thank you, David.
I guess-
What's our time, do we have time for questions?
We probably need to get you closed.
All right.
I have nothing to do this week.
Okay. Thank you, David. And it is now 6:08, and at this time, we will recess and reconvene in closed session in the board chambers pursuant to sections 551.071 through 551.084 and 551.089 of the Texas Government Code in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act for the topics set forth on the agenda. Recess.
Thank you, sir.